How we kick off a new series today called Imprint. Each one of us have these fingerprints, don't we? And these fingerprints for each of us are completely unique. That they're formed while we're still in the womb, just 12 weeks gestation. Each of us have these, wet glands just under our skin, and causes oils and salt to come through in the various grooves in the finger. And so every time we touch something, it leaves an imprint. And while lots of things change as we get older, our fingerprints never do. They remain the same. There's something about what makes us, us. I was thinking about that as a church community. If we had, church fingerprints, what imprint would we leave as a church on our city, on our world? What is it that makes us, us? Our DNA, our values, what is core to our being? And since I've now been, your senior pastor over a year, I guess I've been asking that question a lot over this last 12 months. What is core to who we are? What needs to remain core to our identity? What imprint do we want to leave on the world? And that's what this series is all about. Imprint. So today I want to talk about the imprint that we want to leave on future generations. Now, we're a multicultural and multi-generational church. So just look around, people from all sorts of generations who will be here in this service as well as our other couple of services on a Sunday. Very diverse. And every generation seems to have particular traits. We tend to be shaped by the environment around us, that things have gone on in kind of the decades that we were born. So there's different things written about each generation that are generally true about that generation. And generalizations that's what they are, isn't it? Generally true. So I want to, probably heard some of these things before, but just talk about some of these different traits about generalizations, about generations. So I want some of you to stand. All of you will stand at some point. But if you're 70 years of age or older, and you can choose if you want to be honest about your age or not. If you can stand for a moment and stay standing, so 70 years of age or older. So a few of you here, can we give these guys a big clap? So you were born, either 1925 or earlier, right through to 1945. You're the boomer generation, or builder generation. I'll get you to stay standing during these times. We owe a whole lot to the builder generation, don't we? Many were born in the kind of depression or just during World War years. And so as a result, this generation tends to be quite frugal, very careful with their spending. They value hard work, loyalty, and sacrifice. University for many of this generation was really for the elite. There's different roles, distinct roles in marriage often seen. It's the age of the rotary phone. Remember that big thing that you used to turn and wait forever to get to? Jazz songs came through in this time. So songs like, When the Saints Go Marching In, songs like that. Each generation tends to critique each other in different ways. This generation, sometimes as people will say things like they're a little kind of stuck in their ways, a little rigid. Obviously nobody here, but often that's the way this generation is perceived. Can we give this generation a big thank you? Now, if you're between the ages of 51 and 69, if I can get you to stand. So you were born between 1946 and 1964. This is the boomer generation. And it's called boomers because of the baby boom that came through just after the World War years. It was a rich time of economic growth. A lot of high employment. A lot of technological advancements, increasing freedoms. Civil rights movements, there was space travel, there was television. This generation is often known as the me first generation. Optimistic, value personal growth, tend to have a strong work ethics. In fact, many people will say this generation are the workaholics. They don't know when to stop. They like stuff. In fact, success is often measured by the stuff that you have, and you tend to show what you have off to show that you are successful in life. This is a time when the Beatles came through. The songs like from Garfunkel, Simon and Garfunkel, like, Here's to You, Mrs. Robinson, songs like that. Other generation might perceive you as workaholics and perhaps a little self-absorbed at times. But can we give our boomers a big appreciation? Next group of people, if I get you to stand between 36 and 50. This is the X generation. This is my generation. The Generation X. In fact, many of you between these ages right now aren't even standing, because one of the traits of this generation is that we tend to be cynical. We hate anybody at the front telling us what to do. We question authority. All that. So some of you are still sitting because you just don't want to. It's often known as the latchkey generation, because we would come home after school and our parents were out at work, the workaholics. And that's certainly true in my case. A bit more egalitarian, the blurring of the lines between the historical male and female roles. Preference for collaboration, more collaborative approaches in leadership. We tended to watch our workaholic parents and grandparents, and we thought, actually, we don't want to be like them. We want to have a little bit more work-life balance, don't we? Work hard, but also play hard. It's the age of car phones or mobile phones that are as big as bricks and heavy as bricks. The age of cassette tapes. The age of disco music, like the Bee Gees, Staying Alive. You can see some of you just in that disco outfits already. And people often perceive us in this generation as cynical, perhaps disloyal, perhaps overly casual at times too. But can we show appreciation to this generation? If you're between the ages of 21 and 35, if I get you to stand. A few around. So you're often described as Generation Y, or the millennials. It's the first generation that grew up with internet. Products of a child-first society. When you look at things like company loyalty, you go, actually, that's a real myth. Can anyone stay in the same job throughout their whole life? In fact, can you even stay in the same career during your whole life? There's probably 3 or 4 careers. You've grown up in a global village. And so this generation tends to be a lot more globally aware of what's going on in the world, with a strong sense of justice and what's right and wrong. So over 500 reality TV shows in the Western world. What you've grown up with. This is what you tend to look at and be part of. In fact, you even star in your own YouTube videos at times, but you're the star actor. Seek to make a difference in the world. Music is like the Spice Girls or Madonna. Others might perceive you at times as a little impatient, naive, overly confident. But can we show appreciation to the If you're 20 years of age or under, you stand. Yeah, great boy. So a lot of our night church is made up of 20 and under as well. We get a few at our 9 o'clock service too. And we don't actually have a name for the under 20s yet. It's a little too early to tell. Some people say it might be like Generation Z, or it might be the I generation. The traits get a little too early to tell. The word blended tends to come through. Blended culture, blended roles, blended families, blended causes. Feelings of this culture might come through some of the songs, like Amy Winehouse's song Rehab, or Lord's song Royals. Just trying to think about some of the things in those lyrics. But can we show appreciation to this generation too? So what does all that show us? Well, I guess for one, it shows that we are a very diverse church, right? And that in our generational areas, there are general traits true of who we are. Different things that have happened in the way we were growing up all around us that have affected the way we tend to think of the world. The way we see leadership, the way we see work, the way we see family, the way we see society, the way we act in church. But there's a couple of problems when it comes to these generations. The first problem is that we tend to think that each generation's way of thinking and acting is the right way to act and think. And so when we're mingling with people from kind of other generational groupings who think a little differently about life, church, about leadership, about whatever, we tend to think, well, my way is the way to do things. my way is the way to understand things. And it's very easy for us to impose our musical tastes or leadership styles or ways of doing work or church or whatever onto other generations above or below us. There's another problem with generations. And it's that we tend to live with and for our own generation. So I mentioned this before, but we're all born into a particular generation. And we grow up with that generation, don't we? So we go off to kindergarten or preschool with that generation, go off to school with that generation, get to know all of our friends, then go off to high school, might go off to university, all with that generation. We all get married, many times around the same point with the same generation. Start having, the first child with the same generation and goes on, and then they start going to the same kindergarten and school, and we keep connecting with the same parents of that generation. And then we, get our first job and second job and whatever in that generation. And then we reach about 70 years old and we start to look at a kind of knee replacement and hip replacements, all with that generation. We go off and we go to a retirement village about that same, with that same generation. And then we die with that generation. And the problem with this whole thing is that if you live just with and for your own generation, it doesn't matter what happens during your life, whatever great stories you have, it all stops with your generation. It doesn't matter how successful your generation was, it all kind of stops when your generation dies. And so when you think about that in church life, as a Christian community, we can have all these stories back here of moments where God turned up and these great moments that we would celebrate as a church community. And we grow from strength to strength, and city serve and all these things happen, and we're celebrating all of these things. But if we fail to pass on that faith to the next generation, we all get to this point and then we die, and all that vision, all those stories die with us. See, if we live just with and for our own generation, everything dies with our generation. Imagine the year is 2035. And your children or grandchildren are driving past this place, 17 Wairua Road. And all they see is office blocks and parks. And there's no presence of Green Lane Christian Centre here anymore. Now, there's stories like that all around New Zealand and all around the world, where there was once a thriving church, but they failed to pass on that faith to the next generation, and it just stopped. There's a story actually in the Bible like that. It comes just after the book of Joshua. Joshua is the story about a generation that had such vibrant faith. It's a generation that crossed the flooded Jordan River. It's a generation that marched around the walls of Jericho and saw them falling down. They obeyed God, they seized the land. But they failed to pass on the faith to the generation that would come after them. And so, the beginning of Judges, this is the take of life. And Judges is a pretty dismal, depressing book. It kind of spirals down. The assessment of it is this here. After that generation died, this is Judges chapter 2. After that generation died, another generation grew up who did not acknowledge the Lord or remember the mighty things he had done for Israel. This wasn't told to them. The Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight and served the images of Baal. They abandoned the Lord, the God of their ancestors who had brought them out of Egypt, went after other gods, worshipping the gods of the people around them. See, a generation of faith that had all these stories to tell failed to pass on those stories to future generations, so they never remembered. That they lost who God was. They reinterpreted their history in different ways, and they served something else. They found their identity in something else. He throws some numbers up on the flip chart here. It's the age of the oldest living person in New Zealand history. Her name was Florence Finch. Died at 113. The life expectancy of the New Zealand male. The life expectancy of the New Zealand female. Which means, 40 years' time from now, most of us aren't here. Certainly in 113 years from now, none of us are here. So that, whatever good things happen now or have done in the past, if we fail to pass on the stories we have of God's work, what God has told us about himself, it all just dies with us. We could just be another story like Joshua to Judges. Joshua with all the good stories to tell, but Judges, a generation who grew up that didn't know God. Or we could be like the psalmist. The Psalms, we read this in Psalm 78 verse 4. We will not hide these truths from our children. We will tell the next generation about the glorious deeds of the Lord, about his power and his mighty wonders. You see, the psalmist, in contrast to the generation, Joshua to Judges, that the psalmist is saying, I'm not going to just live with and for my own generation. I'm going to pass on those stories. I'm going to pass on that faith. I'm going to pass on these experiences to another generation, that they would seize hold of them, that they would know the glorious deeds of the Lord, his power, his mighty wonders. Let me throw some more numbers up here in the flip chart. That's the number of, this percentage of children aged between 5 and 12 years old who are most likely to accept Jesus as a Saviour and Lord once they hear about him and have something to hear about. Huge payoff, isn't it? Huge likelihood of investment. That goes down to 4% between the ages of 13 and 18. Drops further again after that. Which means the investment we have in children, hugely valuable. Another figure. That's the percentage of people who know a child or can have an influence on a child's life, right? How many of you here are grandparents? How many of you have nieces or nephews? How many of you have parents of teenagers? Just lean over and pray for them right now. How many of you are parents of young children? Yeah, they're all looking pretty tired. How many of you have children, if you haven't put up your hand, have children in your neighbourhood that you know? Or colleagues, or just children, 100% of us, right? 100% of us are around children at some point. So what I'm really asking is we think about what does it mean to leave an imprint, that we would think about future generations as part of that. What imprint are we leaving on future generations that would be positive? That we wouldn't just live with and for our own generation, but we would somehow invest in future generations. We would take hold of different opportunities to encourage children to, our own children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, along with our church children, neighbours, all of that, to think about ways to understand even a generation that's very different from us. That we wouldn't just try to, throw our own generation's weight in, but we would empower them, encourage them, allow them to thrive, invest in different ways. Now we have a whole lot of ministries here at GCC who they try to do that. So we have, Knee High Army that's under the age of 5, doing a great job out there. Then we have Transformers, from 5 to 10. We have Mania, intermediate, and then Blueprint and Pulse University. All these ministries all trying to help our children and teenagers and university students to thrive. I asked Andrew Thompson, our New Generation Director, this past week, what are some ways that people can get involved, even just here? So doing a bit of a plug, I guess, in some of our ministries. I said, well, there's always different needs. So, people can volunteer in small groups and different events and all that. But then he gave a couple of specific things too. He said, we're really looking for just people to host groups of university students and youth. It doesn't mean you have to be at everything. It just means you're opening up your house to people. They'll come, they'll lead kind of a cell group, a small group, and opportunity for you to meet different teenagers and university students and encourage them in different ways. The same is true for our Mania events just here, just kind of being there to interact with people before and afterwards. We're also wanting to kick off something called 24/7 youth work, where we're wanting to place youth workers in different secondary schools in central Auckland. where they'll be there 10 hours a week, hanging out with students, able to make a difference in sports and arts and a whole range of different things, but as a Christian youth worker. So if you're wanting to be part of a governance structure for that, or would like to help fund that with some seed money at the very beginning, Andrew would love to chat to you afterwards. But I'm just asking all of us to think about the role that we can have in future generations. That if you're not around people, just find someone. Write an encouraging note. Think about the role that you could play in somebody's life. That you'd also take the opportunity to pray for parents. Tough job. They need encouragement. And so if you ever come to services or events here and you see a parent struggling, or you see a child having a big tantrum or something, please don't frown their way. Even though you might have grown up and you might have been like the perfect parent, have no memory of your child having a tantrum or anything, just give them encouragement and just try to help them in different ways and smile their way. And do everything we can to create a culture that's very accepting and welcoming of everybody through the messiness of life. I guess the first thing is investing in the new generations. There's another thing, though, that I want to talk about. It's all well to talk about that in kind of a church context, but the main part where faith is formed is in the home. You see, here at GCC, we worked out this week that if you send your children here every single week, between the ages of 0 and 17, we'll have them for X number of hours, but you have them for 60 times whatever it is that we do here. Let me throw a couple of figures up here. This number scares me. It's the percentage of children and teenagers who grew up coming to church regularly, who when they get to their 20s, no longer embrace the faith of their parents, no longer attend a church community. These are New Zealand figures by Peter Linen at Massey University. So 79% of children and teenagers who grew up in church life, regularly at church, no longer are there in their 20s. So we have about 200 children and teenagers who will be involved in our services every weekend, right? So that breaks down to, I know my maths, 158, using those stats, won't be here in their 20s and won't be at any church in the 20s. If we continue to do what we've been doing in the same old ways, these stats, I don't see why they'll be any different for us. Now, some people, when they look at that, have said, well, that means we need to put a lot more energy into, making our children and youth ministries, brighter and bigger and all that, and we want to do some really good things in the ministries that we have. So we have a lot of plans in place. We'll talk more about those in the months to come. Some really good things happening. But the new research says, actually, that's really important. But most of the time, where faith, can come through, it's not just something taught, it's something called, right? And so the amount of hours that a church has versus the amount of hours a parent has at home, vastly different. So, right now, if you think about the hours that your children have here at GCC, that if you brought them every single week from the age of 0 to 17, effectively it works out about the equivalent of these 3 balls in terms of time during that period. So I guess, think of one ball, the age period of 0 to 5, knee-high army. And then you've got, transformers from that 5 to 10 mark. And then you have mania and blueprint over here. That would kind of sum up the amount of time that we would have between the ages of 0 and 17. Proportionately, this is what parents have every day at their disposal. So every day, a child wakes up and sits at the table and there's some Weet-Bix and there's opportunities for engagement. They go through the day, you're driving them back and forth. Sometimes you feel a bit like a taxi service, don't you? Drive them back and forth from school as you take them to sports games, take them to, music lessons, take them back and forth to their friends' places. A lot of hours, a lot of opportunities for faith discussions. And then you come home and you're trying to, cook dinner, and you sit around a meal table, you sit in the lounge, and you have all these opportunities at your disposal. And then after dinner, you try to do the whole bath time with young kids, which is, fraught with activity and frustration, but again, there's opportunities. And then you get them in their pajamas, and you're putting them to bed, and they're up and down with drinks of water, and they're up and down because they're going to the toilet, and they're up and down for this, and there's something else happening, and there's fireworks happening outside, and they won't sleep, and there's all these opportunities again for discussion, a huge amount of hours. And in fact, if you just look at the proportion that we have, 3 balls worth, and then the amount that parents have, huge difference. And so, as a church, knowing this is what we have, and we want to do really well with that in our ministries, but we realise that this is what you have, proportionately, at your disposal. But there's a scary figure that I want to put up here. As Peter Line at McMaster University said, 85% of church-going families have 0 faith conversations at home. And so apart from maybe a grace before a meal, there's no 85% of families don't pray together. No scripture reading together. No conversations about God. No integration of we as a family serve God together in this. Sense of we're going to be praying for our neighbours next door together. 85% of families, apparently in New Zealand, have no Christian families, church-going families. 85% have 0 faith conversations. So all these opportunities are lost. It's huge. And I wonder if we've got so used to contracting things out. They're sending our children off to school for the education, contracting, green acres to come in and clean, and lawn services to come and mow, and all these different things that perhaps some people think, well, I can contract faith impartation out to the church to do. That's 3 balls compared to what you have. And if faith is not just taught but caught, huge opportunity missed. And I think that is largely why 79% of children and teenagers who might come regularly to church with their families hit the 20s and they're like, what does it matter? You see, this is why Moses, when he's speaking to the Jewish community, Joshua's generation, in Deuteronomy 6, he says, "Listen, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. And you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your strength." He's saying, I want you to find your identity, your security, your purpose in God. And then he says, and you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today. Repeat them again and again and again to your children, to the next generation. Talk about them when you're at home, when you're on the road, when you go to bed, when you're getting up, tie them to your hands and wear them on your foreheads as reminders. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on the gates. Because you see, Moses is saying faith needs to be integrated into the fabric of our lives. That when you're on the road, in their case walking, in our case, in the family mobile, and you're back and forth and feeling like a taxi service, there's these opportunities for dialogue. When you're sitting around the meal table or sitting in the lounge, there's opportunity to talk about the day, to integrate faith into these discussions. When there's a crisis in the family or a challenge going on at school, it's an opportunity to sit and let's pray about that and ask God for help. When you hear of a need in your own community, in your own neighbourhood, it's an opportunity as a family to serve and integrate faith into these very things. At meal times, driving times, bath times, or bed times, all these different conversations that we have. And it might be a formal thing, but it might just be an informal thing through the day. Seizing the opportunities at our disposal. Now I realise that parenting is hard work. And so I don't want parents to feel guilty. I don't want to load up a whole lot on you, but I do want you to realise that the role you have as parents is vital in the nourishment of faith in this next generation. The role grandparents have is vital in the nourishment of faith in the next generation. But aunties, uncles, so really all of us as a church community to seize the opportunity to impart faith to new generations. There's a few words, you never want to hear the word oops in some careers, in some callings, right? When you're at the hairdressers, you don't want to hear the word oops. When you're at the doctors or kind of in surgery, you don't want to hear the word oops. I hate oops to be on the words of parents. As I look at generations to come and go, oops, we didn't pass on faith. We didn't do all we can to nourish faith in this new generation. Again, some of you come from homes that are broken, or you're in situations now that are less than ideal. Sometimes because of your choice, or sometimes because of nothing that you did. But you're in a place that it's just hard. And even with two parents, it's hard. And so we want to resource you. We want you to realize that what you do matters, and that you have to take the prime responsibility to nourish faith in your children's lives. But we want to resource you for that. As I look at what churches often do, we often try to do something at the bottom of the cliff, and we're kind of called upon when life gets messy and children are kind of doing all sorts of weird things kind of later on in life. And we want to keep being an ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, I guess. But we want to get at the top of the cliff and go, we want to resource you here and help you have strong relationships, strong marriages that go the distance. We want you to be good parents who have the tools at your disposal that you can do everything to pass on faith. It's giving you ideas, giving you tools. And so today we're launching a whole new ministry called Faith at Home. So on your way out today, just on your right, there's this kind of whole centre there. It'll be there every Sunday. It'll probably be a different part of the auditorium in the foyer weeks to come, but you'll see it there today. A whole lot of resources there, all designed to help life at home. And home is in the broadest possible expression, whatever that means and is for you. As a couple with kids, as kind of in a flat situation, role of grandparents, wider family, single, kind of everything's there. So here's an example of some of the resources that are out there. And caring for a loved one. In home, it's hard, isn't it, to care for aging parents. And, so kind of open them up. There's a few things talking about that. Different resources through Right Now Media that we have, along with different books that you can, kind of in a library loan system out there that you can have access to. Influencing grandchildren, what does that look like? How can you seize this opportunity that you have in your grandchildren's lives? Raising a child with special needs, even a harder challenge for families in this situation, right? This is really just the beginning of a conversation, a whole lot of different things we need to look at. Empty nest years, very different season, unique stage of life. Family finances, unbelieving spouse, different type of challenge. What does that look like? Again, different resources there, just again providing different help. Conversation started with a team back there who would love to kind of journey the distance. Facing infertility, hard season of life for couples who are wanting to have kids. And you might even be listening to the sermon today going, oh, this is harder again. Tough season of life. We want to be there. We want to journey with you, connect you with different people that we can. Single parents, tough challenge again. Just singleness, particularly if you don't want to be single. And a topic like this kind of just seems to, increase the pain at times, right? Love to dialogue and help you through that journey too. Difficult marriage, blending families, a whole lot of different topics back there. And they'll kind of keep increasing over the months to come. Along with that, there's different ideas back there. Again, just wanting to help provide tools through your journey. So there's a marriage date night card. And we'll keep putting these up at different seasons. These are just different ideas for date nights, for marriages to bring some freshness to things. Then there's different ideas here for younger children. Some of them I want to try with our kids. Upstairs, downstairs, just before you head out the door and get ice cream as a family. It's an activity that you might want to look at just to have a faith conversation around who God is and seize that opportunity. With older children, it's really difficult. Back at this, just questions you might want to keep it in your glove box. That when you're driving back and forth or feeling like that taxi service, just different questions you can ask that hopefully amidst the kind of the grunts and the all that goes on, you can ask questions and seek to have a conversation around things that matter. Now, what I hope you're hearing is, you have a valuable, vital role to nourish faith in your children. Huge role. And we can't do that for you, because this is all we have. And we want to do that well. But we want to resource you for all these hours that you have at your disposal. Meal times and bath times and drive times and all these different things. Because what you do matters. Now let me just mention, I guess, 3 caveats. First, don't try all these ideas at once. Don't pick up all these cards and suddenly try to do them all this afternoon or this week. They're just ideas to help you in these hours, 60 times more than what we have, to just integrate faith naturally. It might be in a more formal setting, there might be you, or it might just be finding informal ways, kind of irregular things that just helping you to be intentional about what you're doing. But grab one of them, have a look out there on the way up. We'll be giving balloons out to kids. I think some chocolate back there and things too. Just grab hold of the opportunity, see what's there, pass on cards to other people, and begin the conversation. Secondly, realize that these are just tools. Different children need different things. Different relationships, marriages, often just different tools kind of affect things. So these are ideas, but please never think these ideas equal success in something. They're just tools. They're just ideas, and you might not have a regular date night, but you can have a thriving marriage. We think date night's a good tool, but a whole lot of different things you can be doing in life. But we want to fuel and encourage health and what needs to happen. And thirdly, it's okay to acknowledge that this is hard. We want you to be able to feel free about saying, I'm having a tough time with this right now. Because relationships are hard. Marriage can be tough. Parenting, hard, tiring. Work at times, right? And so we want to encourage you and fuel you in what you're doing in all these different ways. The big idea today is that new generations matter. And we want to leave an imprint on this new generation. What you do today will leave an imprint positively or negatively on the next generation. So my encouragement is that you would invest in new generations. You proactively step into whatever opportunities are in front of you. And you would seize the vital role you have as parents, grandparents, aunties, uncles, a neighbour next door, somebody here in the church community, to help nourish faith at home. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, thank you for entrusting children and grandchildren and nieces and nephews and new generations to us as parents and grandparents and uncles and aunties and a church community. Thank you for giving us the privilege of pointing them to you, even though at times we feel so inadequate, so unprepared for this role. Help us to create environments in our homes and lives that reflect the truth of who you are. Our dream, our desire is that this new generation would come to know you accurately and fully. May our homes be a place where truth and love prevail together above all else. May the hearts of our children be turned to you. Help us to trust you and serve you well. May your Spirit guide us and give us wisdom and power to do the things that you desire. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, before we close, I'd like to ask a favour. In the bulletin that you received when you came in, there's a survey there, really short thing. I wonder if you can take that out right now. I just want to give you a couple of minutes to fill this in. Effectively, it's just giving us a snapshot of kind of what's going on right now. It helps us to develop more targeted, better resources for the future. So I'm asking if every single one of you can do it, so not just one between a couple, but one each. If you don't have one of these, just put your hand up, or if you need a pen, put your hand up, and the ushers will bring the form with a pen to you. And just do this confidentially. There's some questions there that might be quite sensitive, so you don't need to check with the person next to you or show them. Just kind of, kind of do that and then fold it up, and I'll get that to be passed to the end of the aisles in a minute. Again, this is just you're providing some help, I guess giving us a bit of a pulse of where we are right now. And then from that, we're able to think through, what do we need to do? Knowing this is where we are, how do we respond to that? And resource you and help you and lead you in the various situations you find. So if you can just take a minute or two to pull that in. We stand together, I'll close with our benediction. I can't do your job for you, but I'm committed to doing everything we can as a church community to resource you in this high calling that God has given to you as parents and grandparents and aunties and uncles and people that live next door to children. Because home matters. My dream is what the psalmist said, that we will not hide these truths from our children, but we will tell the next generation about the glorious deeds of the Lord, about his power and his mighty wonders. To my brothers and sisters of Green Lane Christian Centre, may we leave a positive imprint on future generations. What we do today matters for tomorrow. So may we step out and do all that we can to nourish faith in a new community that does not yet know God as we know Him. Go in peace and let's make a big difference together. Amen. See you next week.